there are some wounds that we carry that no one on earth, no mere mortal is going to heal. Only Jesus can heal it. Hi, this is Ed. I'm going to read a passage from the gospel here. It's the story of the woman that had a hemorrhage who was, for 12 years, who came to Jesus for healing. This is from Mark 5:25 to 29. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. That means she was bleeding to some degree for 12 years. And somebody can say, well, didn't she die? But, you can have something like that we don't have a lot of detail, but it certainly doesn't mean that she was bleeding buckets of blood. However, under the law of Moses, a person that was bleeding often like that, blood was sacred, and it made them ritually impure for something like this to be happening. And a woman on her periods could not go into the temple, and this would be, it's the same kind of thing. It's not, period isn't an illness, but you know what I mean? It's something that would have made her ritually impure. It doesn't mean that she was a sinner. It doesn't mean, we all are. It doesn't mean that she was sinning by some medical condition at all, but it was making it so she couldn't go to the temple for 12 years. And on top of that, it made her ritually impure. And this is, when you think about it, there's things that are just embarrassing. Sometimes there are things that are not our fault. It's just conditions or something, I've known people that had a skin condition and they would always wear long sleeves to cover it up because they were embarrassed. And, you look at it and you say, well, yeah, but it's just a medical thing. It's okay. But especially in our culture where we make such a big deal out of people being beautiful and people looking like movie stars, and even young children try so hard to look like, their, favorite star or something. Anyway, this is her situation. And it had been for 12 years. Is this supposed to connect to the 12 tribes? I don't know, but it's a long time. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. I think about where in Paul's letters, about offering the gospel free of charge. And, why, and the scripture, why do you spend for what doesn't satisfy? When God gives for free, or we can go to people and spend money, spend time, spend indignities. I remember when I was young and I was at doctors way too much. And it was very, very undignified to me. And you say, well, how does a 6 or 7-year-old child feel that, or a 9-year-old? But we did. Children do. Maybe that's the reason why I like children in the ways that I do, because I remember what that was like, and I sympathize. I empathize with what they go through. She went to all these doctors, and it says she suffered greatly. Suffer in the way that we translate the scripture sometimes just means being patient, means allowing it. That she allowed them to do all of their things to try and heal her, but nothing worked. The word for doctor, by the way, in Greek, because I actually looked it up in a Greek New Testament I have, which is right here. I actually looked it up to see. And it's a word that it's the same word that's in like psychiatry. Psychiatria. It's the mind, healing. It's a healer of the mind as a psychiatrist. I'm not sure if that really works, but that's what it comes from. And the word that's used really means healer. So it just means that she went to a lot of healers. It doesn't mean they had medical schools and all the stuff like we have today. But she'd spent all that she had. I'm probably taking longer at this, but this is the way I think. This is how I read a scripture as I go through this. That's why it takes me a long time to do it. She was not helped, but only grew worse. In trying to get better, it wasn't working. She'd heard about Jesus. What did she hear? And came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, if I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured. I think that's really, really powerful. She'd heard about him, and even though she'd for 12 years had been trying to find healing and everybody had failed her, yet she went to Jesus. And she didn't feel that she needed the whole treatment. She could go to him, and even if she touched his clothes. So she obviously thought very highly of Jesus' power to heal her. What's interesting is she didn't approach him. Other people did. And I thought about this, and I thought, did she not approach him because she was a woman, and that she couldn't do that? But the woman that, when Jesus was at the house of Simon, not Peter, and was reclining to eat, and this woman comes in and washes his feet and bathes him, with her tears, she didn't hesitate. And there's the Syrophoenician woman that begged Jesus to heal her daughter, to take the demon out of her daughter. She didn't have any problem. And Jesus gave her a pretty hard time before he finally gave her what she wanted, to make sure that she understood. So I look at this and I think, so why is she so hesitant? But she's had 12 years of this. It makes her possibly a bit of an outcast, and people around her probably maybe were uncomfortable with that. Of course, if they touched her, that made them ritually impure too, I suppose. So that would be a problem. So maybe she was concerned about that. Maybe she didn't want to go and approach him. She was afraid because of her shame. Again, it's not because she had any reason to be ashamed. This is a medical thing. It's not her fault. And we won't even go into shame right now. But maybe that was it. So she goes and touches his clothes. And immediately she's healed. She gets what she wants, and she knows. And okay. But then Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? Now she knows she's discovered, but she might slip away. And the disciples say, they're like, Jesus, come on, how can you ask that question? Everybody's touching you. And he looked around to see who had done it, but he didn't call her out. And I think that's interesting because he knew. He could have picked her out of a crowd. I mean, goodness knows he knew Nathanael, when Nathanael first meets Jesus, he goes, hey, can anything good come from Nazareth? And Jesus says, hey, I saw you under the tree. And we don't know exactly what the deal was, what he saw, but whatever it was, it made Nathanael believe. So anyway, he looked around, but he doesn't call her out. He lets her take the action. He calls, but he doesn't point at her and say, it's you, come here. And she approached in fear and trembling. Maybe her whole reason for not going in the first place was fear, but I still think shame is involved there. She fell down before Jesus. That's an act of worship in a way, or an act of humility and everything. And told him the whole truth. And I really like that. She told him the whole truth. What does that mean? I think she told him the whole story about that it had been 12 years and how hard this had been to live with. I mean, that's what I like to think. But at the very least, she told him, I was sure that if I touched her cloak, I'll be cured. And I did. And I don't know, it doesn't say that he asked her, why didn't you just come up to me and ask? Because I would have done it. Because maybe that's not important to the story. And maybe that didn't happen. And then he says, daughter, your faith has saved you. So when I was younger, I used to think that was because he didn't want her to think it was magic. That he wanted her to know what it really was. But when I read it now, it looks different to me. Now it looks to me like he wanted a personal encounter. It's kind of funny. Jesus didn't come to heal everybody. he came to save us. And she could have been healed, but in a sense not saved. By doing this, by having that encounter, he saved her. He allowed her to have a personal encounter, not an impersonal encounter, not an encounter like, oh, I'll touch his clothes and then I'll go away, back to my home. He wanted her to have a personal encounter. I mean, what I would give to be able to do that. It's kind of funny going to confession. One of the things that I love about confession is that I do have a personal encounter with Christ through the action of the priest, in persona Christi, in the person of Christ. But what I wouldn't give, and I've often asked, I guess as part of my whole preparation for it, if I could just go before Jesus himself as he was in his earthly ministry and just tell him the whole truth, tell him everything. What would he say to me? What would he do? And when I think about that, I look at this and that's what she got. I really envy her. Anyway, your faith has saved you. We can suffer so much and want healing and try to get it every place else, but we're afraid to go to Jesus. We're afraid to go to the one that loves us so much, and it demonstrated it so many times. Certainly in my life, he's demonstrated it a lot. And yet, we seek healing elsewhere. And there's people that believe they shouldn't go to doctors because they believe their faith should be enough. And this is not saying that. God gave us the ability to heal through the medical profession and, through medicines and everything. That's all part of the gifts of God, giving us the ability to do this. He wanted us to heal each other. But there are some things, and I guess that's the point here, there are some things that no physician is going to heal. There are some things in our hearts, there are some wounds that we carry that no one on earth, no mere mortal is going to heal. Only Jesus can heal it. And as long as we keep our distance, it's not just about giving ourselves to him, but as long as we keep our distance a little bit and we say, I don't want to get too close. Even if we do get some healing, it's not the same as having an encounter with him face to face. And that's what she had. And he insisted on it. Jesus insisted on that. He wouldn't let her just be healed. She had to be saved. Anyway, that means a lot to me. I put some notes at the end of this about how to read this, that maybe you can go back and look at it. If it's useful to you, that's wonderful. I would have done it at the beginning, but I didn't want to read to you. And I took longer at this than I really meant to. But I hope that this gives you something really good from this scripture. I think this is one of my, I have so many favorites, but this is one of my favorites, and I love it. It's the tenderness of Christ. It's my goodness, it's just so amazing. And it shows what she does, which is stopping short of a real encounter, and how he reaches out and invites her, doesn't force her, but invites her until she finally comes forward and has that encounter with him. Anyway, you could read this and get something else out of it, and that's the beauty of the scriptures, and especially the beauty of the Gospels. We encounter Christ and we take away our own, whatever we need, because he touches us each individually. Anyway, that's Mark 5, 29-34, and I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you for watching.